So what's my fundamental approach to CAD management? Well, for me, it really kind of goes back down to my days in the Boy Scouts of America. I'm proud to say that I'm both an Eagle Scout and also a Vigil Honor member in the Order of the Arrow. For those not familiar with the Order of the Arrow, it's Scouting's National Honor Society. And one of the primary leadership styles that they teach is this concept of servant leadership. Now, the founder of the Order of the Arrow, Dr. E. Erner Goodman, he was quoted, "For he who serves his fellows is of all his fellows greatest." And for me, that's the very quote that I try to live by in my role and function as a CAD manager. To me, the CAD manager who serves his users, his fellows, is in fact of all his fellows greatest. Now, this concept of servant leadership is broken down into 9 points. The first point is listening. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. While the CAD manager should certainly strive to be the resident expert of CAD, he should also be willing and open to listening to his users. His users may very well know a tip or trick that he doesn't, and everybody benefits when you have that open line of communication. But to that end, users, they're going to make mistakes from time to time, and that really kind of plays into the second point, which is empathy. So, even when correcting a user, do it in a constructive way. And that also kind of plays into the third point, which is healing. So, I like to use the example of a baseball coach. While a player might miss a fly ball and make an error fielding the ball in last week's game, a good coach, he might fuss at the player, but he's also going to make sure that the next practice has some sort of fielding drills to kind of help them along the way and help them correct whatever their mistakes might have been. Next, awareness. That's the next point of this concept of servant leadership. Simply knowing what the needs of your firm are, that's just not enough. You have to match those with the necessary solutions, and that might mean upgrading to the latest release of AutoCAD. It might mean providing your users with training. Whatever the case is, you've got to know what both the needs and solution are in order to best serve your users. Now, oftentimes doing that requires a bit of persuasion, which again happens to be the next point of servant leadership. So you might need to persuade the upper management to invest the money in training. You might need to convince somebody that purchasing the next release is beneficial to your users as well. On a user basis, it might be something like explaining to them what's in adhering to the standards for them. Well, when you use our layer management utility, your plots are going to come out correctly. Things like that. Now, speaking of CAD standards, the next point, conceptualization. So, your firm, you might choose to use the national CAD standards, but rather than planning what color I'm going to make my walls, choose to do the national CAD standards first. Don't bog yourself down with the details early on. So I like to use kind of this photographic analogy. Don't take the photos first and then frame them. Instead, go pick out your perfect frame and then compose the perfect shot. And that really goes into the next point of foresight. Just because your firm might not be using Civil 3D or Revit, whatever, today, doesn't mean that your firm shouldn't start planning for them today. Both Revit and Civil 3D, they're going to have some effect on your CAD standards most likely, so if you're in the process of developing them today, kind of have a little bit of foresight, and maybe there's some Civil 3D or Revit pieces that you can integrate into your AutoCAD standard today. I think this next point is really a huge point of a CAD manager stewardship. The fundamental role of a CAD manager is to foster the initiatives that are in the best interest of the firm. Now, in a large firm, this might not always mean those initiatives are going to perfectly align with each and every department, but as a whole, when my firm works as a team, this is in the best interest. So kind of having that stewardship and kind of going back to another point or a previous point, that persuasion, kind of having that art of persuasion is awesome for a CAD manager. And really finally, the last point, building community. A CAD manager should strive to kind of give their users a voice. They shouldn't be the only voice of CAD within a firm. So, do things like assemble a CAD committee, make sure it's active. For those that aren't on the CAD committee, make sure you have kind of regular user group meetings. Maybe it's a lunch and learn, maybe it's a kind of a forum type atmosphere, whatever. One thing that I've personally found as a CAD manager is that the casual conversations that I've had with users are oftentimes the most valuable. So, while having those lunch and learn sessions are certainly valuable, it's those water cooler chats, as I call them, that I find most beneficial. It's when I find, oh well, I was having a problem with building a corridor yesterday, and I know I can go over there and then kind of help that user out. So for me, really, the CAD managers who view themselves as a servant, not a dictator, will in the long run be the most successful. And that's really the concept of servant leadership.